And this one is a cooperative deck building campaign game that can also be played as one-off scenarios. But something that I really do like about this one is that it does provide a narrative, and there is going to be unique rules and changes depending on which chapter you're playing through. But these are all provided through cards, so you don't have a giant campaign booklet or anything like that. Everything is spoon-fed to the players through cards that players are going to be playing through for each of the chapters. The game does also provide quite a bit of variety, even if you do want to play the same scenarios or the campaign over again, because there is a configurable difficulty that you can play through, as well as a hexagonal board that can be randomized for each of the games. And there is a whole ton of different cards that you can use to build your deck, with a portion of them just being randomly drawn at any point throughout the game, and then other ones that are specific to the scenarios that you're playing. There's also a ton of different monsters and events that players can run into, with only a portion of them being used in a given scenario. But before I get too far ahead of myself, I do want to mention that this one is my own personal pick of the week, and I do have a few reasons for that. One of the main ones is that this is a game that's been designed to fit quite a lot in a very small package. I like this for a lot of reasons. First of all, it's just nice to only have the components that you absolutely need, but taking a design standpoint like this means that every detail of the game has been really well thought out in order to try and maximize the amount of fun with reducing the rules and component overhead, which also just makes the game a lot less fiddly. But one other very important detail that comes along with this that I think all of us can appreciate is that this is going to make the game much more affordable. And I will go more into the details of the game in a second here, but if this does end up sounding like one you might be interested in, I do highly recommend subscribing to this campaign and checking it out just to see the prices, because the affordability of this one is going to be one of the main selling factors. And another reason why this one is my pick of the week is because I do think it has quite a lot of interesting, unique ideas going for it. And I don't just mean this from like a gimmick standpoint where it's adding something new that may or may not be fun. What I mean here is that these look very interesting to me from a design standpoint. And an example of this is the way that the deck building works in this game, because in a lot of deck building games, you'll be wanting to trim down your deck as the game goes on. But I think that the way that this game does it is much better than the way 90% of deck building games handle this, because most deck building games create a very arduous process in order for you to try and remove cards from your deck. Usually it comes in the form of either gathering and paying resources in order to do this, or to use your actions in order to do this, or to put other cards into your deck that have an action on them that allow you to remove other cards from your deck when you draw those cards. And I do like variety in games, so I'm glad all of those other options do exist, but this one takes a very simple approach. Anytime you add a card to your deck, you simply get to remove one. This just removes that whole arduous process and just lets you focus on creating the deck that you want. And this also comes with a few other layers on top of it, and I think this game has enough other things going on that the removal of trying to manage your cards and try to trim down your deck is actually a very nice thing, because there's a ton of other things to focus on in this game that all seem like much more fun than that. But in this game, players are going to be playing as individual dragons working together to move through the campaign. The round structure alternates between the player's phase and the enemy phase, where each player is going to have a chance to activate their dragons, and then you're going to be moving to the enemy phase with each of the enemies getting an activation. Players are going to be using their deck to perform various actions like movement, attack, resource generation, or any other special abilities. There's a bunch of different resources that players can generate in this game, and they can be used for a variety of different things, like drawing additional cards into your hand, activating the boost action of a card to make it more powerful, because each of these cards does also have a secondary action that can be unlocked through resources. But then you can also use those resources to get an additional action on your turn, but this does come at a cost with you adding a negative effect card into your deck that will come out at some point, and you'll have to deal with the effect. But then normally it is discarded once it appears. But one thing you might have noticed is that each of the player boards has 3 different icons located on their player board, and this is because each of those icons is going to be associated with either your movement cards, your attack cards, or your resource generation cards. And the reason that this is depicted on the player boards is because each round you're only going to be able to choose one of these to be able to activate. This means that if you're drawing a lot of movement cards into your hand, you might want to perform the movement action, but that might not always be the case if you're in a sticky situation that's forcing you to fight. Another neat symptom of this is that it allows players to decide whether they want to create a more balanced deck, where they might be getting more diverse cards into their hand, but then they'll have more options on their turn, or if they want to specialize with just one or two of these specific card types, and then having a ton of cards in their hand for a single turn, but then being very limited to the type of actions that they can perform. But another really neat layer on top of this, and an aspect of the game that I absolutely love, is that whatever type of card you choose to be able to use on your turn, if you have any cards in your hand that are left of that type, you can actually put them to the side of your board in a reserve so that you can use them on a future turn. Or not, because you might want to do that just to get cards out of your deck and make your deck even more trim for the rest of that round. I really love games like this that give you powerful decisions like that, but usually at the cost of the other. But the cool mechanisms don't stop there, because I also really love the way that the damage works in this game and the way that you heal your character, because when you do take damage in this game, you're going to be taking one of these life cards and then adding it into your deck. Each of these life cards does also come with a specific type, and once that card comes back out, all you have to do is play that card in order to heal yourself and to be able to put that card back on your board. But because that card does have a type associated with it, that means that you have to choose that type that round in order to heal that health. This is just creating another great decision point, because players will be wanting to heal themselves, but if it's not the action type they want to perform at that specific moment, you're going to have another tough decision, which is going to create some really interesting moments in the game. But after all the players have played all the cards that they want to play, you're going to be moving into the action phase for the enemies, and you're going to be activating them based on the cards provided in that scenario deck. But enemies aren't only limited to actions during the enemy phase, because some enemies can have reactions that might come into effect depending on how the players interact with them or if they deal them damage. And there could also be some special events that occur that could cause them to get additional actions, because after the enemy's turn is up, you're going to be drawing an event card and then resolving the effects of that card. The game continues like this as players move through that scenario deck and following the narrative and the options that it has to offer. And then, of course, if players are playing through the campaign, you'll be moving into the following scenario until you reach the end and hopefully win the game. As always, I do have a link to this campaign in the description below, and like I said before, this is one that I do recommend following along with, because I think it's going to be offering you quite a lot of game for a very reasonable price. If you do like what you've seen so far, you probably don't need any more reasons to back this game, but I will give you just one more, because I think this is a really cool fact, and that's that this game is actually designed by the people running the One-Stop Co-op Shop. If you're not familiar with this channel, this is a YouTube channel that has provided a ton of great coverage over the years. They do an amazing job, and they are completely self-funded by themselves as well as their community, so they don't take any money or anything from publishers. So I know supporting their campaign will mean a lot to them to make all their efforts just a little bit more sustainable. And what better way to show your support for a channel like this than to get an excellent game in return?